Hello everyone and welcome to another great day from the second day of the quarterfinals in a match between Levon, Aronian and Magnus Carlsen. Magnus won the first day really easily, I would say. Not easily, but the score would suggest it wasn't all that difficult for him. He won 2 games and drew 1, which makes it a game over as 4 games are being played and you only need 2.5 points to win the match. But this is something that happens in pretty much every tournament. Magnus crushes the first day and then he gets into a lot of trouble in the second day. So very interesting to see what will happen here. And also I would just like to mention after this video I will have a very short announcement and also a very fun story that includes the Mailman. So if any of you are interested in that, you know, there will be more content after the actual game. So Levon with the white pieces opens with e4. Magnus replies with e5. We have knight to f3. Knight to c6 and bishop to b5, going for the Ruy Lopez defense. We have for the Ruy Lopez opening, we have a6 Morphy's defense, pushing back the bishop, and now bishop to a4. And this is something that's been played a million times. Knight to f6, we have castles, and the bishop to c5. Now, nicely developing the so-called the Arkhangelsk variation, or the Neo-Arkhangelsk, or the Moeller variation. It bears many names. We have c3, preparing to strike in the center, and Magnus castles here. We have b4, now striking in the center, and the bishop back to a7. And now that the bishop is no longer able to go back to e7, it does make sense to pin this knight. So bishop to g5, pinning the knight. And now there are a couple of moves that were played in this position. The most common idea is just h6. We want to chase away that bishop, or maybe even force white to capture here. Another idea is first playing b5, just throwing in a nice Zwischenzug, or there's even knight to e7. There is only one game in the database with knight to e7. It was played in a game between Balashov and Grishuk that Grishuk was able to win very nicely. But here we have e captures on d4 by Magnus, and now it is only as of move 8 that we have a completely new game. So let's see what's Carlsen's idea, as Levon's next move does not come as a surprise. Levon pushes e5, and it makes sense. The knight is pinned, Levon attacks it, so what do you play here? Of course, h6. This is a very common theme. We have bishop to h4, and now g5, chasing away the bishop even further. And here there are some lines where you can actually sacrifice a piece here with captures, and captures, but this is not one of them, because at the end of this line, knight captures on e5, and you don't really have a good compensation for the sacrificed piece. So instead, Levon tries bishop captures on c6 first. We have d captures on c6, and only now knight captures on g5. And now, well, it would be possible for Magnus to capture the knight, for example, captures and captures, pinning the knight. Now d captures on c3, offering a queen trade. Here Levon would just trade queens very happily, captures, and now the knight cannot move because the rook would be hanging there. So just knight captures on c3. One way the game could continue, and after bishop to e6, for example, e captures on f6, and we get this position where white is up a pawn, but Magnus would have the bishop pair, and in an open game, it's compensation enough for being down a pawn. So instead, after knight captures on g5, we have d captures on c3 by Magnus. Now Levon trades queens, as in the previous line, captures, knight captures on c3, but now not trading pieces, but rather going for knight to d5. And now, what do you play here? Well, here Levon went for, as his knight is still under attack, he moved it with knight g to e4, but there was the very interesting knight captures on f7. Now there's a double attack on the rook, and you can't really capture the knight, but the problem is after rook to e8, it's hard to find a move here for white. Because if knight captures here, just king h7, and the knight has no squares. The bishop covers f5 and g4, so the knight is kind of trapped. You have to defend it with bishop to g5 or something like that. But then we could get a lot of well, different moves. For example, rook captures, attacks the bishop, bishop gets defended with h4, and so on. Let's say captures, and again we get this position where white is up a pawn, but black has the bishop pair, a little better development. It would be pretty crazy, but the white would definitely have some chances here. So instead, after knight d5, Levon doesn't go for knight captures on f7. Instead, he goes back, knight g to e4, and now Magnus trades. Knight captures, we have b captures, and rook to d3 now, paralyzing the knight as the c3 pawn would be captured. So rook a to d1, offering a rook trade, and Magnus trades. We have captures, and bishop to e6 now, preparing to bring the rook into the game. We have a3 as the pawn on a2 is under attack, so Levon defends it. We have a3, and now Magnus doesn't want to face knight to f6. Knight to f6, if this knight comes to f6, it's just going to be an overwhelming position to defend, because it's just super ugly. You put that knight to f6, you can maybe play some rook d3, rook g3 moves. It's gonna be pretty hard to play this. So Magnus plays this very instructive pawn sacrifice, f5, and he allows e captures on f6 en passant, which Levon goes for. There really isn't nothing better. E captures on f6, and only now rook to e8. So bringing the rook into the game. We have h3, and now bishop back to b3. Attacking the rook and opening up a discovery towards this knight. So here only now Levon goes f7 with check, gives back the pawn, king captures, and now rook to d7 with check, saving both the rook and the knight. We have king to g6, not allowing any more checks, and now as the knight is hanging, you have to move it, knight back to d2 with an attack on the bishop here. So rook to e1 with check makes sense, as the bishop pair is almost fully operational. King to h1, and now the excellent bishop to e6. Magnus tries to trick Levon into capturing on c7 so he can get bishop to b8 in, and the rook, and the rook is a goner. As it's pinned, you can't move it. So instead, after bishop to e6, we have rook to d8. Levon sees that, of course, he cannot capture on c7, and now rook to e2. Attacking the knight, and with a double attack on the f2 pawn. So knight f3, and Magnus just grabs it. We have bishop captures on f2, bishop captures, rook captures, and king to g3 now, chasing away Carlsen's rook. Rook to c2, going after the c2 pawn, and now rook to d3, defending, but now that's a very passive square for the rook. We have bishop to d5, paralyzing white's position even further. The knight now cannot move, as then you lose the g2 pawn with check. So Levon tries a very nice trick, knight king to f4, now hoping for rook captures, because then you just pick up the bishop, rook captures, pawn captures, and knight to h4 check, and that's just it. King has to move, you pick up the rook, you're up a piece, you're going to win this game. Magnus, of course, sees this, so he sidesteps any future checks, king to f6, and now g4. So if Levon can get a nice pass pawn, h4, g5 in, then maybe he can still fight, as he is down a pawn. But Magnus, of course, will try to prevent this. Rook to f2. Definitely the right idea. We have h4, now preparing to create a pass pawn, and b5. Magnus also starts pushing his pawns on the queen side. And here, Levon doesn't really have an active move. The rook needs to defend the knight. The knight cannot move because it's pinned. So king to g3, trying to chase away the rook. But now, of course, you know what's happening here. Feel free to pause the video and win the game for Magnus in the simplest possible way while I give you a couple of seconds. So, for those of you who were able to do it, congratulations on being a true master of the endgame. And for those of you who just want to enjoy the show, it's a rook captures on f3. Just trade everything off, and that's it. Doesn't really matter. You could also capture with... no, you can't. You have to capture with check. So rook captures on f3, bishop captures, king captures, and now there is nothing more to be done here. Yeah. Although I don't, okay, they still continue playing, although this is, of course, it is known that this is winning for black. Black is up a pawn. The problem is Magnus played c5. We have king to e4. Levon tries to contest the position, but now just c6, taking away all of the squares from the white king. King back to f4, and now a5 by Magnus, preparing b4, which will create a pass pawn. So here, king back to e4, and now even a4, because when you push this and a captures, you want to have this pawn as fast as possible. So here, king d3, but now king to a5, king to e5. Levon again gains opposition, king e3, but now b4. and there's nothing much to be done here. Problem is, if you capture, then we already said, for example, captures, and then a3, the pawn cannot be stopped, the king is too far away. And if you don't, if you play something else, for example, after b4, like Levon did, he played king to d2, but now Magnus just played b3. That's not a b3. Magnus just played b3, and it was in this position on move 42 that Levon Aronian resigned the game, as there is nothing more to be done. This is a pass pawn. White king is stuck here guarding it, because otherwise it's going to become a queen, and Magnus will use this time to collect these pawns, promote this pawn, or use any other way of winning this game, because there are plenty. So yeah, really awesome game. Levon tried. It was really brutal. They could have gone, a lot of different ways. They could have gone. Levon could have gone for that knight captures on f7 idea, which was a lot of fun. But with best play, of course, it would not be enough to grab a full point. Both of them know this, as this has been fairly analyzed throughout the years. So yeah. Really a wild game. Magnus won the second day as well, so this game ended with a result. Every game ended with a result. I meant with a decisive result. Magnus won the first game, and the next two games ended in a draw. So Magnus wins both the first and the second day, and proceeds to the semifinals. And if you guys are interested in some other pairings as well, here they are. So let's just check that out. So yeah, Magnus defeated Levon and will face Yanni Pomnishi in the semifinals, and Wesley So defeated Alireza Firouzja. Maxime lost to Anish Giri, so we will have Wesley So versus Anish Giri, the other pair of the semifinals, and then we're gonna see who will be in the finals. But by the looks of it, objectively, I guess it would be another Magnus versus Wesley final, but you never know. That's why we're here, and anything can happen. So that's the game. Hope you guys enjoyed it. And now for the story that I promised you, or rather first the short announcement. Long time ago, like maybe 6 months ago, I created a Telegram page called The Bar and the Library, and I invited some people over, but there was a lot of spam in it, and people didn't really follow any rules, and I didn't have any admins or moderators, so I decided not to advertise it anymore. But today I kind of revived it. I added 3 new administrators. Maybe we can add some more if needed. So you guys are welcome to join. For the moment, we're not having any serious discussions there or anything. It's just a nice place for you to visit, like a virtual bar in the library. Could be a lot of fun. So there's that. First link in the description below if you guys are interested, and also now the story regarding the mailman. Now, this morning, as we woke up, Yelena and myself went to get a cup of coffee, and we were the only ones there. Of course, you cannot go into bars, but you can drink the coffee outside, and we were the only ones there having some coffee, and then this mailman arrived. But I did not recognize this mailman, as he has a different route than all the other mailmen that I know. So we started, conversing. As that's what you do when you see a mailman, and we talked about a lot of stuff. We talked about how the mail gets from one place to another, the history of mail, and some potential future scenarios of what will happen to mail delivery, and we discussed a lot of things. I don't want to bore you with that, but I asked him what was like his most memorable experience while delivering mail, and he said that there was one very negative experience. It involved a dog and some blood, but there was also a very positive experience. He said that he was delivering a mail to this backwards village, like the snow was really deep. It was like even above his knees, and he said he was freezing. It was like minus 23 Celsius or something. It was maybe some 35 years ago or something like that. And he said that he was so cold, he was so sad, he thought he wasn't gonna make it. I mean, I don't mean that he would die, but that he wouldn't be able to deliver the mail, but he was able to deliver the mail, and it was this really house that was really deep into the village, and it was a really old house. He said the people were like extremely poor. The house was made of stone and of mud, and that he was like, I mean, wow, that's he couldn't believe that people still live in those kinds of conditions, and when he knocked and offered them their mail, they invited him in, and he said that they warmed him up and they gave him some food, and it was the best food that he ever had. He said that he had like a goose with some cabbage, with some sweet cabbage, and it was a smoked goose. I don't know, I've never had that, but like smoked goose with some cabbage, and he said that he drank like half a liter of red wine, and that he was so happy, and that even though the journey of getting there was really harsh, the overall experience was great, and kind of restored his faith in humanity, because he said those people didn't really have anything, but they still handed him the leftovers of the smoked goose. So really awesome. And whenever you encounter a mailman and your mail is safely delivered to you, you should always award them in any way you can, because without people delivering stuff properly, we could go back to the dark ages. So I just wanted to share that with you, as it was quite a coffee I had this morning. So yeah, once again, that's the game and the story and the announcement. Hope you guys enjoyed that. I would like to thank Klaus Moeller Nielsen, Robert Kiefer, congratulations Lukal Volenman for matching, chessboost.com, and Gregory Rosalimo for contribution to my channel. Thank you a lot, I really appreciate it. As usual, you can check 2 of my previous videos here. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you soon, continuing with the coverage of the semifinals, checking up on your wonderful suggestions, and whatever else happens in the chess world. Thank you all, I will see you soon, and have an excellent rest of your day.